Welcome to NHL Quick Hits. I'm David Crosby here with Steele Roden with a jam-packed episode today as we grade some recent contract extensions, coaching hires, and trade rumors. We're going to start with St. Louis Blues winger Vladimir Tarasenko, who has reportedly requested a trade because he no longer trusts the Blues after the ligament damage from his original shoulder injury 3 seasons ago was not repaired in the first 2 surgeries performed by team doctors, and it had to be operated on for a third time by doctors who were unaffiliated by the team. Now, while he's not on this level of superstardom, Steele, this kind of does remind me a bit of Kawhi Leonard and the San Antonio Spurs, a well-regarded organization that lost the trust of one of their star players. Tarasenko has 2 years left on his contract with $9.5 million in cash owed next season and a $7.5 million cap hit. Now, we all know what happened with the San Antonio Spurs. They traded Kawhi Leonard to the Toronto Raptors, who went on to win a championship, and it kind of made their return look pretty dismal. So which team do you think is the best fit as a trade partner to not only give Tarasenko the best opportunity to contribute, but also give St. Louis something worthwhile back in return?
Yeah, there were a couple of teams, and if we're talking about the best team that will give Tarasenko the best opportunity to, go deep in the playoffs and really be a great fit for him, the top team for me is the Carolina Hurricanes. And I think if you can slide him in on that right side between Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov on the top line, it's going to be a dream line for the Carolina Hurricanes, especially if they're going to be losing Dougie Hamilton this offseason, depending on what might happen with him if he decides to switch teams and sign somewhere else. I think it would be a great fit for Tarasenko and the Carolina Hurricanes. They have $28 million in projected cap space moving forward next season. So I think it could benefit both teams here, and the Blues can get a decent amount of prospects, picks, or even players in return here. But I think for the best fit for Tarasenko would be the Carolina Hurricanes. Another option that I was looking at was the Los Angeles Kings. I think this is a team that needs to do a lot this offseason and make a really big splash with a big player. And I think that what they need right now is someone on the wing. And I think Tarasenko would be another great fit that can help up front and really get as they have a lot of old veteran guys on the team, but they have a couple of young guys as well. So I think Tarasenko sliding in on that first line, right wing side again, like I said, for the Carolina Hurricanes could be very beneficial for the LA Kings moving forward. Like I said, they need to make a big splash this offseason. And I think they can get a lot of return. The Blues can get a lot of return from the Kings as well. And just to mention that they got Viktor Arvidsson just a couple of weeks ago as well. So if you can add another player like that, I think the LA Kings will look really good moving into next season.
I love both those fits, and we're going to get to grading the Arvidsson contract right after this. I do think LA is probably the more likely trade partner. They seem to have a bit more assets they could probably afford to send to St. Louis, whereas it's a little more difficult for Carolina, in my opinion, unless they did a sign and trade with Dougie Hamilton to kind of give up something that they wouldn't miss or wouldn't make them worse in the short term. Just because Tarasenko has missed so much time recently, it's hard to know exactly what he's going to contribute. But I think, outside that first line in Carolina, I do think they need some more depth scoring. And Tarasenko as a winger on the second line, or even bumping somebody down from that first line like Teravainen, I think that would be huge for a team like Carolina. Personally, I like the fit with Washington for a couple of reasons. First, they're still in that win now mode with their best players on the older end of that spectrum. I think they can afford to take a chance on a guy like Tarasenko. And if it doesn't work out, he's only there for 2 seasons. You can kind of move on and reevaluate after that. Second, it's rumored they're likely to lose TJ Oshie in the expansion draft to Seattle, which would cause a huge void on the wing in their top 6. And the biggest reason is they're rumored to be looking to move Evgeny Kuznetsov, their 29-year-old center who has 4 years left on an 8-year, $62 million contract, which of course carries a $7.8 million cap hit. That's just a few $100,000 more than Tarasenko. I think matching up that money with any team or finding a trade partner, like you mentioned, in LA, who has that cap space to absorb that much money, is going to probably be the biggest hurdle for St. Louis to clear in a potential deal. Now, let's grade some deals that have made headlines recently. And we'll start with the one you mentioned. The Kings traded a second and third round pick to the Nashville Predators for Viktor Arvidsson. How would you grade this deal for each side?
For the LA Kings, I think it's an A minus, and for the Nashville Predators, I would give it a B. I think the LA Kings got an absolute steal here for a second and third round pick for Viktor Arvidsson is just incredible. I think he will be very beneficial for this young LA Kings team that really needs to generate some type of offense. And Viktor Arvidsson getting a fresh start can really bring that energy moving into next season. So I would give the LA Kings an A minus and the Nashville Predators a B.
I'm kind of right there with you. I think, it does seem to make sense here for both sides. It was a bit of a down year for Arvidsson. He had just 8 goals and 16 points in 56 games. That's likely due to his 5.8% shooting percentage, which was actually between 11.7 and 17.4 in each of the last 4 seasons, when he averaged 31 goals per year in each of the last 3. So I think he's going to have a nice bounce back season for LA. I think he should easily eclipse 20 goals next year and possibly get back to that 30 goal pace. We've seen a lot worse players traded for a first round pick. So this could end up being a big steal for the Kings. The Oilers signed Ryan Nugent-Hopkins for 8 years and $41 million, almost identical to his last 7-year deal with a slightly lower annual average. Now, Nugent-Hopkins, like Arvidsson, had a bit of a down year, but to me, he's proven to be a legitimate second line center, and this contract's a home run. I love this value. I think he's an extremely underrated player. How would you grade it?
I'm right there with you. I love this contract for the Edmonton Oilers, and I think he's been absolutely fantastic over the last couple of seasons. Like you said, it was a little bit of a down year, only having 35 points this season, only 2 points in the playoff run when they got swept by the Winnipeg Jets there. But yeah, so for the Edmonton Oilers, I think it's a great contract deal. But again, this offseason is going to be really tough for them. There's a lot of salary cap issues. There's a lot of adjustments and things that they need to address moving forward with the bottom core of their forwards as well as their goaltending. So a lot of things to do in the offseason, but once they got this deal done, it's really good for the Edmonton Oilers and for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins to be able to stay there for another 8 years.
Yeah, we'll see what years 6, 7, and 8 look like on this deal, but it's all about right now for Edmonton, and I think that $5 million and change for a legit second line center, that's a bargain. It was really a no-brainer for them. Let's look at a similar deal from your team, the Minnesota Wild, who gave Joel Eriksson Ek a 8-year, $42 million extension. The 24-year-old had a breakout season in which he received some Selke votes and played against some of the best top lines in the league while adding 30 points in 56 games. How do you like this move for your Minnesota Wild, Steele?
Yeah, I love it. I love Eriksson Ek. I think he's been an absolute fantastic player for them. I would have liked it to see a little bit lower just for the Minnesota side's perspective. But for Eriksson Ek, obviously, it's a great deal. $5.25 million for 8 years. He had 30 points on the season, like you said. I would have liked to see the Minnesota try to get a little bit lower on this contract just so they can make a little bit of more moves. Maybe they can get back into discussions with Kirill Kaprizov to get him settled in there as well. But Joel Eriksson Ek, like you said, some Selke nominations, some eyes looking his way for how he's been playing for the Minnesota Wild. So I'm glad to see him stay in Minnesota. I would grade this probably a B+.
Yeah, this is a high B or low A for me as well. I think it's great to lock him up for the long term, and I think they're betting on his upside. He's probably only going to get better from here, and I think what we saw this past season is probably the basement for what we can expect going forward for the next few years. The Wild also signed Nick Bjugstad for another season at $900,000 after he scored 17 points in 44 games after a midseason trade from Pittsburgh. How'd you like this deal?
Yeah, I love this deal. And it kind of reminds me of what the Toronto Maple Leafs are doing with Jason Spezza, a league minimum $900K for these veteran guys. And it's the same thing with Nick Bjugstad. I think he's done an incredible job in that bottom 6 role. Who gets, around 20 to 25 points a season. A veteran guy who can lead by example and just kind of do the small things right and show what the Minnesota Wild young guys can do and lead by example, like I said. So again, I would rate this probably a B+ for the Minnesota Wild as well as Nick Bjugstad moving forward.
Obviously, a bit of an age gap, but I think the Spezza comparison is perfect. I think both of these guys could get a little more money elsewhere. But of course, Bjugstad, a local guy in Minnesota, probably wanted to stay close to home, and he took a little bit less money to do it. He's an overqualified fourth liner. I think he can give you a solid 12, 13 minutes a night and probably fill in on the third line if the team does suffer some injuries. Now, the most recent extension was the Leafs signing Travis Dermott for 2 more years at $3 million total. It seemed to have split the fan base a little bit. Where do you land on this contract?
I think this is a total waste of money for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I would have liked to see him walk or get picked up by the Seattle Kraken. For me, I just don't know why you're giving away $1.5 million a year to a guy who doesn't play the game the right way, in my opinion. I think he's very foolish out there, very selfish with the penalties that he takes. A lot of complaining and whining from him that I see every single time he's on the ice. I think you should look to guys like Rasmus Sandin or Timothy Liljegren to take those spots. I just don't like the way Travis Dermott plays the game. To me, it's a total waste of money, and I would grade this around a D.
It definitely depends what happens, not only with his play going forward, but like you mentioned, with that expansion draft, because I do think this contract almost came as like they didn't want to have to expose Justin Hall, for example. So they almost gave Dermott this money, seemingly hoping Seattle is going to take him. He's not a flashy player. Like you mentioned, he's a decent defender. It's those unforced errors, those turnovers that can be really frustrating in his game. I think he's a decent player. I'm not sure he's worth $3 million over 2 years. I think the Leafs do need that depth, though. I mean, the fact that he can play both sides, I don't know. I kind of see both sides, but I don't think Seattle's necessarily going to select him, but I think the Leafs are crossing their fingers and hoping this is the guy that they take off of their roster. Let's finish with the Seattle Kraken's hiring of their first head coach in franchise history, a guy that probably has a lot of insight into this roster and whether or not Travis Dermott is somebody that Seattle should be taking in that draft. It was considered a surprising hire by many. He was an assistant coach for the last 2 seasons with the Leafs, Dave Hakstol. This is his second head coaching gig after he went 134 and 101 in 3.5 seasons with the Flyers from 2015 to 2018-19. So how did you like this choice for Seattle?
I'm with everyone else. I was a little bit shocked because I think there were a couple of bigger names out there that the Seattle Kraken could have looked to, and maybe they did look to, and they just weren't. Those coaches weren't interested. So with Dave Hakstol, like you said, those 3.5 years with the Philadelphia Flyers, he did a spectacular job. Getting to the playoffs twice. Unfortunately, didn't make it in his second year, but then losing in the first round, and then again with the Toronto Maple Leafs last 2 seasons. Losing in the first round or the play-in bubble, if you will, 2 seasons ago. So I think it's a shocking hire. I think he's, obviously it's a new team coming into the situation, and maybe he's going to do a good job there. But I think guys like Gerard Gallant or Bruce Boudreau, who were on the table and maybe could have potentially taken that head coaching job, would have been a better move. But with Dave Hakstol, he has the potential to be a great head coach again, and we'll see what he does this season with the Seattle Kraken.
I was pretty surprised too, and maybe this just comes down to the double, Seattle GM Ron Francis, assistant GM Jason Botterill. They're familiar with Hakstol from their time together with Canada's 2019 World Championship team, and it was kind of interesting to hear some of the reasons that they went with Hakstol. Like they wanted a coach who is invested in not only winning now, but in seeing his players develop and succeed. So maybe they like what they've seen having him with Philadelphia and Toronto, being able to get some of the younger guys on that roster to improve their game, because Seattle is probably not going to have the success that Vegas had right away. I would assume they're going to be a little bit younger, take a little bit more time to develop. So should be interesting to see if Hakstol can develop along with that roster and maybe get over that playoff hump. That's going to do it for today's episode. On behalf of Steele Roden, I'm David Crosby, and thanks for tuning in to NHL Quick Hits.